Hi, my name is Kyle, and I'm from Union Hill. And going into my freshman year, I met this guy, and I'm not going to say his name for privacy, but he had failed his freshman year, and he was now in my class, and nobody really knew that much about him or who he was. But the first time I saw him, I can honestly say that I was scared, because when we made eye contact for the first time ever, I could see that something was wrong with this kid, and I didn't want to have anything to do with him. But it turned out that in one of my classes, he was actually sitting right in front of me, and he turned around and he was like, "Hey, what's your name?" I'm like, "Well, my name's Kyle," and we started talking a little bit, and as we talked, I got a little more used to him, and we kind of became acquaintances, not really friends. But as I got to know him more, he started revealing things to me and saying things to me that kind of really made me uncomfortable, like the things he would do in his free time and the things his parents did. And it was at a youth meet one night at my church that our youth pastor said, "I want every one of you to think of one person, and I want you to pray for them for a week, and just focus on them in your prayers, and really, really cry out to God for their souls." And instantly when he said that, I thought of this guy. And at first I said, "No, I can't do that. There's no way. I mean, he's just weird. And I'm this Christian, and I don't associate with people like that." But then God came at me again and said, "Pray for this guy. Pray for this guy." I could feel God speaking to my heart saying, "Pray for this guy." And so I did. I started praying for him. And over the course of the week, I would pray for him, and the next day at school, he would ask something like, "So, what do you do in your free time?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm a football player, and I go to the church down the road. I go to Union Hill Nazarene." And they'd be like, "Oh, you're a Christian?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a Christian." And at that point, he reached down and got his backpack and pulled out a book that had a Wicca written across the top of it and said, "Well, you Christians, y'all have your Bible, but this right here is what I live by. This is what I do." And he started flipping through it and said, "I can cast spells on people. I can talk to the dead." And I just backed away and said, "Hey, man, don't get that anywhere near me." But still, when I prayed again, God came at me and said, "Pray for him. He's a lost soul, and he's looking." And then I started to think about the love of God. And I started thinking, have I shown the love of God to this person? Have I amplified the love of God enough in my life to where he can see it in me? And so I prayed for him again. I never talked to him about it. I never talked to him and said, "Hey, man, you need to be saved," or anything like that. I just prayed. And I prayed for a whole week. And then the next Sunday, I was sitting in church, and a few minutes into the service, I turned around, and on the back row, there he was, sitting there. I never invited him. I never said, "Hey, man, come to church this Sunday." He was just there. All I had done was pray for him, and he was sitting in the back row of my church. This guy that had done all these weird things, and that I had really just didn't want to talk to, and he was so weird. He was sitting on the back row of my church. And when the service ended, he got up and left before I could say anything to him. But then the next day at school, I said, "Hey, I saw you at church." He was just like, "Well, I just wanted to come see what it was like. I just came just to do it." But at that point, I got really excited because I'm like, "Oh, God's doing something. God's going to do something amazing." But I started praying for him again. And this time I prayed for him earnestly and with compassion in my heart for this guy. And I said, "God, somehow use me to make a difference in his life." And I said, "Hey, we got this really great youth program Wednesday. Why don't you come drop by?" And he was like, "Well, I don't know. I may be doing something else, but yeah, I'll do it." And he walked in that Wednesday night, and he sat on the back row, And I was up there with my friends. I kind of said hey to him and then left him alone. But our youth pastor preached on salvation that night, on how that no matter what you had done, or no matter how messed up you had made your life, that God could come in and save you and completely just take a hold of your life and reform it. And that night, our youth pastor said, would anybody in this church not like to accept salvation? And there was only one person, and it was the guy. When our youth pastor said, would anybody raise their hand and come up here and accept Christ, that guy back there, the guy who had condemned me, had condemned Christianity, raised his hand and said, I'd like to be saved. And he went up and he knelt at that altar and prayed for God to enter his life. And after that, I thought, this is what it's about. It's not about just associating yourself with other Christians and just staying within the walls of your church. It's about going to the ones who are hurting and who are lost and amplifying the love of God to them.